Hello, and welcome back once again to another enlightening episode of our podcast, where we explore the depths of human potential and uncover the secrets to achieving extraordinary success. Today, we're going to dive into a topic that's often overlooked in the pursuit to self excellence, and that's mindset. Well, good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing? So, let me give you a little bit of background on this. We've all been told that one of the keys to success in life is to, you know, focus on the skills that you have, learn the right skills, and that'll bring you success. However, I think that we can probably challenge that in some ways because I think that's kind of a false narrative. And then one of the things that I want to say about that is, yes, the skills you have will help you with your success, but I really think the overall skill that you need to work on versus skill set is mindset. In today's podcast, that's really what we're going to talk about. Is we're going to talk about just challenging that conventional wisdom, and explore a little bit more about the transformative power of mindset, which I think is a key component of it. So we'll look at what is a growth mindset look like, why is that important, how it can be empowering to you, and how it helps you be able to embrace change and also handle challenges, and then also work your way through the setbacks that you may have as you work your way down that road of success, and be able to reset yourself and continue to move forward, cultivate that resilience, and just have what you need to deal with adversity as you move forward. So whether you are an inspired entrepreneur, a student, or someone who just simply wants to take their personal self to that next level, stick around because we're going to get into talking about why it's more important to have a stronger mindset and not just a strong skill set. With that said, I'd like to go ahead and Vince, have you share a little bit when someone comes to you and they say mindset. What do you think of? What does that mean to you when you hear someone say mindset?
Thanks, Brian. You know, over the years, as I've been developing my own mindset and beliefs in terms of how it helps me improve in my professional and personal career, there's so much research out there around mindset. And when you compare a growth mindset versus let's just say a fixed mindset, to me, that entails the ability for one to be resilient and change and challenge themselves, and to take all of those beliefs that we grew up with, as well as all those programming, you can call it, and question it, and questioning it in the way that we recognize when we hit some of those roadblocks and those challenges, and we hit those failures or whatnot. It allows us to really reflect in and think about, why is it we believe the things we do? What does that mean as we evolve and change and be a better leader? And then, how do we constantly improve ourselves and cause reflection on how we treat ourselves, how we interact and treat others? What are some of the components to living your most fulfilled life? And then, of course, the big thing for me as a parent is, how do I help my kids become more resilient, to believe that they are they have the ability to, be their own destiny and whatnot. And then on the skills side, skills, you learn this in school. You learn about all the different types of things. I view skills as the ability to master some of the basic things, and then, of course, other things related to certifications or one's ability to, put it on their resume. And bringing it all together, if you had to pick one or the other, which I feel like we often kind of pit them, skills versus mindset. At the end of the day, I think you need them all. Skills are skills, mindset is mindset. But mindset piece is the component which evolves across it all. Without a mindset or a growth mindset or whatever you want to call it, it's beyond skills, it's beyond knowledge, it's really resiliency.
I agree with that 100%. Vince, you hit on a couple of key things I really want to come back and talk about, but I'll go to Erica next. I want to have her share her perspective on when someone comes to her and talks about mindset. What does that mean? What are some of the first things that she thinks of? So, Erica, how about you share a little bit about just your perspective for mindset?
Yeah. When you start talking about mindset, you're really delving into um, a frame of reference many people don't want to go into. When you ask what your current mindset is, that forces a person to actually sit down and think about their present mind. And the thing about your present mind is that it's made up of a lot of past experiences. So people may know where they want to go, but to actually sit down and do the evaluation on where their mind is and what they need to do to take it to the next level, most people don't want to do that work because they don't want to think about where they've been and where they are now. Um, they aspire to to reach certain goals, to have a certain lifestyle, to reach a certain point in their career, but or parenting. They want to be a certain type of parent, but then you have to confront who you are. And for most of us, that's very, very painful, and not just painful, but also time consuming to work through those things. So when people ask me about a mindset, well, first of all, you have to sit down and acknowledge where your mind is right now, and make a list of opportunities that that you can explore to address whatever's going on with your current frame of reference, your current mind. That would be, in my opinion, the first step. And then from there, you can start developing the others. But most people, they know that they want to do something different or have a different experience, but to face where they are in their minds right now, it's very difficult.
I absolutely agree with you. And there's a couple of things too that you hit on that I certainly have that I made a note of. I want to talk about. But Chris, I'll have you share next, just to give us some ideas of, from your perspective, mindset and what that means to you.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Mhm.
First of all, if you're looking at mindset from just its base definition, it's your mental attitude or inclination, and really evolves around your belief system and how you see yourself within the world, and I guess to a little more deeper degree, um, what your perspective on um, how you affect the world and how the world affects you. Um, One of the things I think we've actually covered on this in the past in some of our previous modules was it's sometimes a lot of it, and I'll touch on with what Erica said. A lot of it has to do with how you were raised, um, some of the things that your parents and the people that your elders instilled in you. Um, one of the things I always talk about when we talk about young people is, um, do you have dreams? Were your dreams fostered? You'll be surprised how many young people that are running around that their parents didn't see the benefit of fostering some dreams. You know, let's just say the kid says, so say you're a child and you all of a sudden get, I want to be a policeman, and your parents say, no, 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 policemen are bad, or firemen are bad, or stuff like that. But it's really about, I honestly, the one thing my parents did do for me is they did allow me to dream, um, and I thought that was probably the best thing that they could do for me. But the thing that also needed to come in there was the discipline of those dreams. Um, Now, obviously, Bench touched on earlier with mindset. There's actually two different types of mindset. There's a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Now, when I saw that, I immediately thought, well, I'm a growth mindset guy because I always look for infinite possibilities of what can be. And I actually use that to drive me today. Um, and I think if you look at it, uh, so let's just go a versus standpoint, skills versus mindset. I think your mindset will take you a hell of a lot further than your skills. will take you in life.
Thanks for sharing that, Chris. And that's interesting that you had that perspective about it taking you further. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that. Before we do, I'll just kind of my thought on, mindset. And Erica kind of touched on it too. I think the key component with mindset is tied to self-belief and also maybe some of the self-limitations that you may have for yourself. Because I think a lot of the times that's where we get stuck, and especially when we're talking about developing a growth mindset. And that is tied to, as you said, Chris, dreams, having goals and objectives that you want to work towards, right? That are for you, not for others. And I think that's the other key component of it, that's part of the mindset piece, is really starting to understand and parse out what it is that is important to you in your life and where you're trying to go in the directions you would like to go, and that you're not doing it for others necessarily, or for someone specific, or because society says, or this is the norm, and those types of things. So that's where I believe a lot of what I call a growth mindset really is rooted in. That is figuring out, from a self-awareness standpoint, what is important to you, and moving from there to start to take the action, formulate a plan, and move yourself forward. I think that's the key component to it. What I do want to go back to, and Vince, I'll start with you, because you mentioned your kids and the responsibility that you feel you have there to kind of help them start down that road. So I want to actually bring this back to our educational system, because when we've talked a little bit about our educational system in the past in a few other episodes, is there a responsibility, or should there be a responsibility somewhere along the line in our educational system to be responsible for not just teaching skills, but talking about things like mindset and setting goals and supporting your dreams and that kind of thing? Or do you think that swim lane should strictly be to parents and grandparents and other influential people in the children's lives? I'd be curious to hear your perspective on that, Vince.
At the end of the day, it all comes back to that conversation around culture. And when I think of what a culture kind of encapsulates with supporting a growth mindset, that really, well, one, it creates a culture around inclusivity, so that everyone feels like they're a part of something, and they're supported by it. So when you talk about the culture on education, and you talk about a shift that I've been seeing in the fact that, for example, my kids go to charter schools, they were really engaged in that, because when I looked at how they were preparing the students to take ownership, there's a concept called student-led visioning. And it's what's actually very different from the more traditional education system. And not to say that, well, I wouldn't want to say one is better than the other, but it's different. And the idea is that, from my belief, we look at teachers not in the traditional sense, they're facilitators. And so there's a component of supporting, encouraging, helping students kind of get to what the goals that they are setting versus the goals to which the teachers or school is setting on behalf of the students. Because there's that piece of it. And then the other piece about it is, as we all know, peer-to-peer learning. I learn more from my peers than I think from other sources, because there's a level of, there's the control side of things is, it's not, you're trying to help each other out and grow, especially when you're trying to foster this whole idea of collaboration and works well with others and can communicate and team player and all those things too. So, kind of cultivating that mindset around that piece is really important too. But at the end of the day, when we talk about growth mindset, it has to come from the individual. The individual has to believe that they are the navigators of their own destiny, and they have the ability to persevere through it all. But they also have to feel supported throughout the entire system too. I think it's my final comment on this one too is when you think about education, you think about the evolution and the why it was created to the way it was. That's where I'm seeing a lot of changes. when I look at some of how systems have been evolved in other regions or other countries too, that's indicative of this need for even the education system to have a growth mindset and evolve. And you see that through different adoptions of programs like design thinking. That was something that was fairly new when we were supporting it almost 20 years ago, because the primary reason around that was to support students' ability for critical thinking, which it's my belief is being heavily embedded in a growth mindset.
So I had a follow-up question to that, Vince, because you started talking about culture when you mentioned that. And one of the things that, I think kind of follows on with that is generational cultures, from the standpoint of, you go back to the 50s and it was traditional, go get a job at the factory or the marketing company down the street. You work there 30 years and retire, and that's the strand of life. Then obviously we moved on generationally, and now we're talking about millennials or Gen Z, and now moving on to Gen A. And I think that's shifted. So from a culture and from a generational work process, do you feel that there is some things that we can do from a corporate organization wise to better support our people and groom and grow, be prepared for how a lot of the younger people, their mindset is different about their approach to the job, and maybe leaning from there into personal development?
There's never been a time in history where our youth, well, all of us have access to so much information and knowledge. And we could throw in the whole conversation on AI too, in terms of that skill. We no longer need many of the different job functions or skills today to be able to really analyze and create and spit out quality reports or whatnot using AI. We anything. It's impressive to see how technology has impacted our lives. And so when I think of our current student population today, and I think about the ability for them to be able to harness and master all of this information, and then I reflect back on how our education system was developed for that post-war industrial-based component of just following the lines and do what you're told and be in that career job because it was stable, and that stability provided that opportunity because you would then retire and have your pension and whatnot, versus today's mindset, which is, it's about growth, it's about change, it's about trying different jobs and having many different lives, career lives, being a digital nomad and all these things and doing it really well and making good money. It's interesting when you reflect on the aspirations of a lot of our youth to become YouTubers versus what, when we grew up, or our parents and our grandparents, it was to be a doctor, a lawyer. So it's clearly, if you look at the generational differences based on, well, what does that mean and how you aspire to be, there's a lot of conflict between what our grandparents and our parents think we should do versus what we will do in the future.
Agreed. So, Eric, I'm going to come to you next, and I'll tell you what my question is, just kind of following up on where Vince left off with that. Is I know that, Eric, a lot of the work that you do outside of work, but still related to work, has to do with working with a lot of organizations similar to, what you supported today. And so I'm just curious, obviously you interact with a lot of people, different ages, different career backgrounds, etc. When you're dealing with these organizations, working with these individuals, what is the general thing that they really focus on, or you hear them talk about the most? Is it sharing knowledge and skill set, or is it more talk about mindset and how to be stronger and how to evolve yourself? I'm just curious to hear kind of what your experience has been when you're working in those circles.
Now the big emphasis has been on mental health and really controlling, managing. Pardon me, this noise will come through in a minute. Live action. But the emphasis really has been on mental health and being able to become resilient and understanding that although you're resilient, You have power in your no, and you really need to respect your own no. In the same way we teach everybody to respect other people's no's, we have to be more mindful in respecting our own no, and being very protective of our own boundaries. That's been really a big theme. I was listening to what you all had been discussing earlier about the children, and I'm a big proponent of compulsory pre-K 3, pre-K 4, and it touched my heart to see a lot of our military officers engaged in a public service announcement. They did some videos about why it's important to national defense to have pre-K 3, pre-K 4 available for everybody, kindergarten available to everyone for free, and that is essential for us to provide them a labor force that is educated early. They could see the advantages for our country, and but the same thing goes not just in the military or businesses related to the military, but all aspects of our community, of our labor force. Having children taught at an early age about emotions, about decision making, about um, mindset, how to speak to themselves, how to breathe when they're feeling certain emotions, how to pause, how to respect other people's no's, and to respect the power in their no. If we can start teaching children that at 3, 4, and 4, and not just for children that are rich, but children who live in public housing developments, children who are unhoused, children who are all around the world. And again, live action. But children everywhere need to be given this skill set. And I think it's important that we do that because it's the right thing to do. But even if you're not interested in the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do for our communities in general, for our labor force, our national defense. It's what's right, but it's also what's smart. So, but back to your question, what the big push has been, it's been about really working on your mind and protecting your mind, protecting your sanity, protecting everything that you've used to get to this point in life, protecting that. Because you can teach, everybody has a talent. You can teach a skill. Everybody's born with some natural skills already, but you can teach people how to make a living. That's, monkey see, monkey do. You can do that. But what do you have to get people involved in real early? It's beneficial to get them involved at real early is that whole mindset, how to protect your mind, how to protect your mind from the things around you that's coming at you to destroy you or destroy your mind. But that in every organization that I've been working with in the last several years, that has been the big push.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's important. And we actually did an episode specifically talking about what I call mental fitness, right? I think that's a key component. So, Chris, I'm going to come to you here in just a moment to talk about that piece of it because I think it's something you can relate to. You, as you shared in the past, just your challenges you had over the last few years and how you've had to work on strengthening that mental fitness piece so you could continue to move towards that growth mindset and moving yourself in the right positive directions. So whatever you're willing to share with the audience about what that journey's kind of been like and why it's been really relevant for you, I think, to really, as you say, flex that mental fitness muscle so that it can continue to feed into your personal growth and the directions and achieving your goals and objectives as you move forward.
It's interesting you would call on me for this portion of the program because you do know it's a big thing with me and my mental fitness and some of the challenges. I mean, I've faced challenges my entire life, but it just seems like this last couple of years of challenges, the pocket of challenges that I've had to deal with, and how much it has really forced me to look at my overall mental fitness, with my mental acumen, things of that nature, really make that a top priority in what I consider my still ability to ascend in life. how that's driving that whole aspect of me. You know, it used to be, you know, like I said, I learned to work from my grandfather. He was my model. Even though my dad was a pro athlete, different dynamic. I didn't see him all the time in his element, but I saw my grandfather and my grandmother in her element. She was a welfare supervisor, so I saw those mechanics and how they operated. Now, a little bit of background: they're both school teachers and educators. They actually ran a group home at a certain point in time. So I think that's where a little bit of that rubs off on me. So they were dealing with youth and how to shape those young minds. And then, of course, along the process, I come along, and I'm kind of in that group, right? Even though I'm not in the group home, I'm been drafted into that mindset of creating these positive images of how I should behave, how I should approach work, how I should approach other human beings in the interactions. A little bit of an example. Another example is we weren't allowed to speak slang in my house. So whenever you're in the street, slang comes out. So of course you bring it back to the house, and grandma's like, not having it. We don't talk like that in here. And it got to the point where they didn't even say anything. I just got a look. And I was conditioned after a while to know what the look was. And I was like, oh, yeah. What I meant to say was. So consequently, that little exercise, that probably was over the course of a 2 or 3 year period that formed the way I talk on a day in and day out basis. And for me, I'm kind of driven by wanting to be to have people to communicate clearly with other people, but more importantly, to have them understand me in a more clear and concise method. So a lot of times when I listen to people talk to me and I hear, the English language is so vast and expansive that there's so many words that are interchangeable. And if you don't have a strong command of the English language, then sometimes you actually kind of for one, you're going to have trouble communicating with certain people because they're not going to. You're going to bring in more questions than you're going to provide answers. So that's kind of a big one on my part. But the fact of the matter is, one of the things that through all that conditioning, because that's part of that's part of the perspective. I think that on that level, I can talk to almost anybody. And that is one area, we all have insecurities, right? Let's be clear on that. It's a question of how they manifest. But one area that I feel fairly secure in is when I'm talking to people that maybe their skill level is higher than mine, but I think I can hold my own in those conversations and in those rooms. And I think that that's something that is not given enough emphasis when we talk about, because I always go back. I'm going to be clear. I'm going to always go back to young people because they're, they drive the bus. I'm hoping that these young folks, really start to step up and understand their place in society, which is you guys have power because you have strength in numbers. But I don't think a lot of times you guys are the way the internet is, they don't see coming together, for better causes. So that's the one thing I really kind of keep my eye on when I'm doing what I'm doing, and more importantly, that's what drives me every day. Like I said, off camera, we got some things we're working on, some technical things, some life things. This is a part of it, and I'm so grateful that I'm in the company that I'm in every day, because I get a chance to grow leaps and bounds almost on a daily basis. So I get challenged. Vinny, you and I were talking about that yesterday. The challenging part of friendships. Your friends challenge you, Brian. You challenge me at times, and sometimes it's for a brief moment. It's a little off-putting, but then you relock back into the fact that this is something actually. The uncomfortableness of this really is creating brain cells and promoting growth. If you choose to look at it that way, if you look at it from the other way, then you don't get anything out of it. And I choose to, we go back to the mindset thing. My mindset is I don't get stuck in that moment, and I rise to the idea that I have a, whether it's Brian or whether it's you, Vinny, that I've got these people around me to propel me forward. And that's my mindset.
Excellent, Chris. Thanks for sharing that. That's an important piece of it. There's several things that you kind of touched on that I want to kind of elaborate a little bit on. One of them was you were talking about communication, and I think that's an important piece of the whole growth mindset thing, and in two ways. One piece of it is obviously whatever your world around you is. So what is in your universe and what type of communication are you receiving? What type of reinforcement are you receiving in your own universe is one piece of it, and how that's being received on your side. The other thing is self-communication, that self-talk piece of it. What are the conversations that you're having with yourself as you go through the process? I think that also matters greatly as to your personal thoughts, your personal beliefs about mindset. So, Vince, I want to ask a question for you because in your earlier thing, you were also talking a little bit about the family and then how that's now transitioned into generational things as we move forward. What are your thoughts as we do move forward with growth mindsets and those types of things, with all of the new technology and all of the new career opportunities that are out there? Where does that fall? Where does it lie to make sure that we are talking about these things? Is it just self-education that we need to be focused to? Is it getting involved in groups and organizations like the ones that Erica supports? Is it a hybrid of all of these things? Well, how do you see this playing out for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years?
So there's some interesting data to show that in the next 20, I think it's 20 to 25 years, we will have 2 billion folks in the age of retirement. Basically one of the largest populations of our generations, the baby boomers, will be essentially retiring, and along with that also unfortunately passing away. So what does that mean for our greater economy, both nationally and internationally? And how do we really allow our current youth to maintain, sustain, and grow all aspects of our economies? And it's fascinating when you bring it back to mindset, and you bring it back to education, you bring it back to, it's my belief that having our youth interact with our kupuna in Hawaiian, which is seniors, is really valuable. Like Chris, I was also raised by my grandparents as well, and I value that immensely because it allows me to work with and be with and sit with and respect our older generations, and vice versa. You think about it as a youth growing up with the more fixed mindset. You're coming at it as a growth mindset because everything's new, and so you're teaching each other. And so many times I see a lot of the grandparents and whatnot just enjoying being around it because they're learning such new things. I think that's really where Erica was kind of talking about the mental health side. It's the ability to be vulnerable. That piece is so important when you think about how do you approach in a way, and it comes down to it. I think it really comes down to everyone. But as a society, as a culture, how do you create and allow all that? Because for many, when you have, or you're feeling vulnerable, or you're feeling like you have this fixed component of like, I can't change, or I won't change because of fear or ego or insecurities, that's the part where it gets really difficult. And that's the part where I believe it's up to all of us as an inclusive culture, both nationally or whatever. We all need to embrace that, because at the end of the day, it's really, to support all is to include all, is to just know that it's okay not to know. It's okay to not quite understand or feel like technology is a great barrier, but that's why we have classes. That's why we have other things. That's why we need to push more towards educating all generations, not just our youth.
Same for me. You brought up about grandparents and grandparents for me, and also great grandparent, which was I was fortunate enough to have that in my life as well. And I remember when I was young, I thought my grandfather, specifically my dad's dad, could walk on water. I mean, it was just a being that to me was just so huge and larger than life. And then just another story I'll share, just talking. And I think that the thing that's been the common thread that we've kind of heard as we've talked about this, when we talk about growth mindset, right, is resilience and having some resilience. And a lot of that is because of you have to push forward, you have to push through things, and there's going to be some discomfort. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty that you have to deal with as you continue to grow and evolve. So having the resiliency to work your way through that is an important thing. Whenever I get in that space of, kind of feeling like maybe I'm overwhelmed or this is too much, I think about my great grandmother who lived to be 102. And she was born, though, in 1881. So you think about that, from 1881 to 1983, all of the things that literally changed in her life that as a child did not even exist, from electricity to the phone to cars to automobiles, TVs to radio to flying in an airplane. I mean,
The right to vote
the right to
as a
vote. I mean,
woman.
just so much changed in the span of her lifetime. And I'll never forget the first time she actually flew on an airplane. She was 96 years old. So imagine what that must have been like in her mind at that age, right? So whenever I'm in that moment of not being able to say, kind of feeling like, oh, this is too much, or I can't take another step, I always kind of reflect back on what she probably experienced in her life and the change and the growth, and just, picking herself up and going straight at it and trying to move forward and learn the new way. That's always kind of given me this extra boost or extra amount of strength. So I think that's the key piece, Vince, that you mentioned when you're talking about having that opportunity to engage with, as we call them here in Hawaii, kapuna, but our seniors, because there is such a knowledge base and such a wealth of information that you can gain from being engaged with those people. That said, Erica, I have a question for you, because I know you do some work in this area, especially with your actual business, with the estate planning and those types of things. So, looking at that, when you talk to people, and what is their general mindset when they're looking at legacy?
Well, just recently, more a broader spectrum of the public has started to think about it. Lots of times, people would, when you talk about estate planning, they'd say, "Oh, well, I'm not rich. I don't have anything to leave behind." Well, everybody does, right? You have your whole legacy of who you are, not just about money, but you want to make sure that you pass on what your values are. Like you mentioned, your grandmother and everything that she had seen, and well, you want to share the mindset with your children and your grandchildren. If you're blessed enough to be able to know your great grandchildren, them as well. It goes back to, if you can impact children very young, you can help direct that whole trajectory of their life about how they feel about themselves and how they see the world. So I think that as grown-ups, all of us have that opportunity to impact the lives of those young people. As far as when people come to me and they start talking about their legacy and what they leave behind, they always reference, their children and their grandchildren. And they don't necessarily reference first money, because a lot of people think that they don't have a whole bunch to leave, right? But they always reference what they want the future generations to know about them. So my suggestion is, everyone take out a piece of paper on a quiet day and just write out, what do you want, your Brian to know, your Chris to know, your Vince to know, your Erica to know. What do you want them to know way after you're gone? You know, I when you're talking about your grandmother, I was like, oh, wouldn't that have been great to get somebody would have been just the journalist asking her questions, because I am interested in knowing how she felt when she got the right to vote. That's wild, right? You born in the 1800s, so she had to been like 40 years old before she almost 40 before she got the opportunity to go to the ballot and do that. So she was a part of seeing that whole suffrage She was a part of seeing Black women wanting to participate in the suffrage movement, and a few white women saying, nah, and then them doing that. She saw all that. Like, how marvelous is that? Like, yeah. So we have an opportunity now, knowing what we know about as grown-ups about our grandparents and some of the opportunities that we missed of writing stuff down and videotaping them. We have that opportunity to do that for our grandkids, our great grandkids.
Yeah, I think that's a key component of it, is to be able to share those things and reach back and bring those things forward from a legacy standpoint. I recently met a gentleman here who it's very interesting. We got to just talking, and we're talking about my podcast and some other things, and um, we're roughly the same age, and he has kids, and he's got a couple of young grandkids, and he learned that I do have this YouTube thing that I'm doing. He said, "Oh, really?" He says, "Yeah, I just started doing YouTube as well." He says, and I was like, "Wow, okay, that's awesome." He says, "So what's interesting is my motivation for starting my YouTube channel was I want my grandkids and my great grandkids to know who I am and what I stood for and what I was about." So he's like, all of the information that I'm actually recording is just to have a historical archive that'll always be there. Well, you know, 50 years from now, they can go, "Oh, you want to know about your grandfather? Here's what your great grandfather, here's what he stood for. Here's some of the things that he talked about," because it is a repository that essentially lives forever. If you really think about it, it's kind of evergreen. And I thought it was fascinating because he's not looking at it for the money or to grow subscribers. It really is just his way of chronicling himself and what he's about. And that's the platform he's chosen to place it on. So I thought that was very, very fascinating to see that.
And you know what? As parents and as children, sometimes we find out about our parents doing things that are so positive through rumor. Like, and then, or somebody said, "Oh yeah, I knew you're." I was someplace 2 years ago, and then I met somebody that went to Lamar University, and he was in my dad's fraternity, and he was like, "Oh yeah, your dad was one of the." I was like, "What?" Yeah. Things that our parents never share because we're children, right? Especially our generation. They thought that their business. They didn't really interact and share a whole bunch of stuff with us about their Brian, pre-Vince, pre-Chris life, right? Pre-Yerka life. But you hear things about your parents that from other people, you're like, how come you didn't tell me this? But as now we parents, we can do better. Godparents, we can do better and document these things. Like you said, the gentleman you met is doing. So our kids and grandkids won't hear it through the grapevine that you did something great. You'll have things that you think they would ask if they knew about it. You'll have it all recorded, and that's cool.
Yeah. No, I thought that was a very interesting thing that he chose to do. So, Vince, I want to come to you because I have a follow-on question for you as well. And we've talked about this offline before about essentially the gap between where you can be sometimes from a what is expected of you standpoint because of cultural things, family things, etc., and then what you really feel you want for yourself and the direction that you want to go. So, with that being kind of the delta that's there between those two sides, what has been your experience and what advice would you give someone who maybe is in that space of just trying to figure out, yeah, I know my family really wants me to do this, or this is a circle we've been in before, but I really want to go this route. What can you share to kind of help move them forward just from a mindset standpoint so that they can be open, grow, and take that challenge on, because it can be very challenging to, as they say, become that black sheep and move yourself forward.
As I think we all go through this evolution ourselves individually, and Chris talks about this a lot too, and that's why we all enjoy each other's company. It's the self-sabotage piece that really affects us all, and it's tied to our mindset. It's tied to our upbringing. It's tied to how supportive of an environment you grew up in, both in the home and in the school. That's the part where, at the end of the day, one's ability to truly believe that they are the masters of their own destiny and shape that. That's something that I think we all aspire to hold, and that's everything. So as it comes to the idea of things that we can do. Well, the first and foremost is that I wouldn't say positivity is the complete narrative, but it's having gratitude and looking at all the things that are going right, and then to shift it and change it to something that's different from it has been or present day. Change happens on little increments, and so a lot of it's based on what we have as habits within our lives. So the little things, that's the hardest part of it, because whether it's adding meditation into your life to reduce and be more calm and whatnot, or to journal, to have more self-reflection, so that you can kind of see that change, note that change, and really have that communication with your inner self. And then, of course, there's the bigger, broader picture, which is, intention is everything. Without intention, you can't change who you aspire to be. And then my final thing is, once you're already thinking about this and you're doing this, you're already moving towards it. So when people say, "Oh, I will be," well, you're already doing it. If you're already working on it and thinking about it, you're already on your path. And so recognize that you're growing, just because you're losing that sense of fear, and you're losing that sense of, oh, I can't do that, I won't do that, I'll never aspire to be that. So just be kind to yourselves.
Yeah, agreed. So I have a final question and I'm going to throw it to each of you. I'll start coming to you, Chris, here in just a second. And I'll tell you, and Vince, you kind of skirted just a little bit when you were talking about, the negative mindset or the positive mindset and where you are with that. But what I want to talk more specifically about is optimism versus pessimism. So being a pessimist versus being an optimist, and how that also plays into this, and why it's relevant. But more importantly, if you do find yourself on that side of the fence of being more of a pessimist than an optimist, what are some of the things that you can do to start to shift that, to get yourself on the other side? Because I honestly believe, and this is just from my chair, my perspective, to be a growth mindset type person, to be strong in mindset, that it can't be done and also be a pessimist at the same time. I think those two things are just contrary in how they're structured. So step one is awareness, and then step two would be, how do I start to transition myself from the pessimistic side of things to be more optimistic? So Chris, I'll come to you first and have you share, what your experiences and what your thoughts are about optimism versus pessimism.
I'll start out with to address the elephant in the room, where optimism is everything. Pessimism is a life killer. I tend to operate on the optimistic side of the world, even when things are looking somewhat dire. The thing that, and I think I think my optimism is wrapped in hope. So that is one thing that my grandparents, we go back to my grandparents, what they instilled hope in me. Now, I'm a child of the 60s. So, it was an odd age, because we were trying to progress out of we were trying to progress out of the 40s and 50s. And it was almost like coming into this new age and new era. And I watched my grandparents make moves, and they're Southern people. My grandparents are from Tennessee, and obviously, if you know the Black history, Southerners migrated to the North for more opportunity. So my life has been draped in the idea of that there's always opportunity out there, but it's on you to push that envelope or discover it is, what your love or what your passion is. I genuinely am a person that tries to stay away from that pessimistic side of the fence, because, to be honest with you, it just promotes you spinning your wheels. It promotes you driving down dead end roads. And there's really, we go back to you go back to I mentioned earlier about dreams. Pessimism is a dream killer. Let's be clear on that. And the thing for me is I'm in the, it's funny I always feel like I'm the test case here because I'm in this state of, the state of continued evolution is what I believe that I'm going through right now. And I'm truly starting to embrace it. Because it's your reality. You can either run from your reality or you can accept some of your reality. And I'm at that point. Believe me, they're rough days. I wake up some mornings and it's tough to get going. I've mentioned that. I've had conversations about it. And the thing that helps me out the most is just being able to admit where I am. Brian, you like I said, Vinny, you've been a great friend over these last few years. Brian, you know me 25 years. You see me at my best, you see me at some of my worst. And the thing that provides comfort for me is knowing that I have a brother in arms who's not going to judge me, and is going to tell me, you're going to add in things where, add in your little nuggets of wisdom here and there. It's typically, which I think we all need, like I said, it's back to what kind of support system you have. Believe me, when I admit to certain things, let's just use you, Brian, as that example. When I admit to you certain things, I go through a little point. There's a little bit of a gap where I'm like, do I want to keep this to myself, or do I want to share this and basically release myself? Because the more I hold it in, the more I'm a prisoner of my own moment. And I think there are a lot of people out there that become a prisoner of their own moment, and they really just take out any bit of optimism you can have in your life, because I think optimism makes the world go. Obviously, you have to put the effort in whatever it is we're talking about. But the reality point is there needs to be a little bit of optimism, some kindness, some grace with yourself. And those are the things that I'm learning more and more how to be okay with. This is where the mindset part of the equation really plays in. It's not my skills. I can learn. Trust me, I'm doing I started Brian, you and I were talking about that the other day. I started recently, and Vinny, obviously you know about this. I started doing some continuing ed modules through the LinkedIn has a higher education program. And I find it very wonderful because it's almost like a collegiate experience, but you're really hitting all the cliff notes and you're accelerating it. And I think for me, as I shared with you the other day, Brian, this is really helping me to foster where I'm looking to be in the next year. Let's just say next year. So I've been taking a lot of, I grew, when I went to school, it was all about business management. So now I've kind of, we've been through the tech hopper. I've been doing all the, I've been fortunate that I've been very fortunate. I've been in 6 or 7 industries over the course of my professional career. So you get to see a lot of different vantage points in the world of commerce. But now I'm like, let me zero back in on what it is that who I kind of am in a certain respect, which is I'm a manager of sorts. So I don't want to pigeonhole myself and say, well, I'm just a project manager, or I'm just a this, I'm just a that. I'm a manager of all things. So, and that just goes across the whole platform of your life, whether you're managing personal situations or whether you're managing professional situations. It's still about managing them and understanding that that hat never goes. I never take that hat off, in your travels. So it's really about managing it and actually being able to put your hand on it to hopefully give it a greater outcome.
Chris, thanks for sharing that. And that's true. It is about managing, whether it's personal or professional. A lot of the skills are transferable on both sides of that fence. Erica, I'll come to you next. What can you share based on your experiences, and obviously being a generationally running a business, that you've had to work through and all of that, just from a optimism versus pessimism and how important that's been in your life.
Similar to Chris, I think on the just kind of outside looking at me, I think I appear to be just a generally optimistic person. So that's not always true, though. I too have those moments of sadness, and sometimes sadness for no real reason, right? That
Mhm.
that pessimism sinks in. So, what do you do to really shift from the pessimism setting in to actually kind of turning your day around? A lot of it is just really knowing what is the truth and not letting your mind take over, not letting that pessimism take over your day, take over your moment. Because sometimes you'll have just a brilliant win. And if you let the pessimism set in, that can really ruin the occasion. So, reminding yourself to stay present, because what's present is what's true. Um, and that helps dictate the fact that you're not going to be worrying as much. Because lots of times, remember, our worries are coming from stuff that's not even happening, that hadn't happened. It's that's not going to happen. And those type of worries will bring on those imaginary concerns, will bring on the pessimism that really could ruin your moment. Because you'll hear about successful people having a highlight, right? But for whatever reason, they couldn't enjoy and be present in that moment because they allowed um, imagined things to set in and ruin that. So how do you shift? I think the first thing is look at the present. Look at what is actually true right now, and then that's where you start.
Very, very true. Thanks for sharing. And I think that's a key component. Vince, I'll come to you and share a little bit from your chair, just what your experiences have been and your views and what you think the audience could benefit from learning how to transition from that pessimistic space to over to being more optimistic.
It's interesting hearing you guys all talk about this and think about, I think we all resonate pretty well on being more positive and opportunistic and just hold the belief that we just enjoy life, enjoy things too. But you're right. It's I was thinking about more of if there's only this and that, what is being more of a realistic kind of a realist, the that whole middle ground be, and where you can kind of live in many worlds and depending on what it is. And I was thinking about how as I get older, and many of us do, your beliefs, your changes evolve once I'm just going over that hump, that midlife component of it too. So I'm realizing that I have my own transformation, and it was tough for me. So definitely between both sides, I was evolving and thinking, okay. And it wasn't until I was just like, okay, I had this in my quarter life. And someone was like, "Oh, you're going through a quarter life crisis," it was called. I was like, "What is that?" And I had to read a book on that. And then now I'm going through my midlife. And instead of calling it a crisis, my buddy was like, "Oh, it's a transformation." I'm like, "Okay, I like that a lot." So, you know, end of the day, it's. I think a lot of folks talk about this and ask, well, what gets you up in the morning? What motivates you? What do you live for? Um, and having that as your center, in entrepreneurship, we call it the North Star, having that as being your key, and then obviously thinking about what are those short-term wins or the things you want to work on, personally, professionally, whatever. I think going back to another component too, the internal dialogue that we all have within ourselves around that um, positive or negative mindset. That's the muscle, and that's the piece that we really have to start looking at. And when we get caught up, or when that encroaches into our thoughts, in attachment theory they call it protest behavior. So when we hear that protest behavior, for us to change that or shift that, it's about noticing, okay, there's something that's my internal programming is telling me to be careful of, to fear, to protect yourself, right? It's the whole fight or flight mechanism. That's the piece where, if we adopt a habit like, okay, well, what is the positive? What is good about this? And you negate it. And what was it? Someone said, for every negative thought, you need to put in 5 positive thoughts, and that's how you do it. You start looking at, so you start dispelling all that programming and that negativity in you, and you start doing it once and twice, and you keep doing it. And you can put a little journal on it. And you have friends that keep yourself accountable as sounding boards. Find a therapist. Like, therapists are the best. If you don't like them, you fire them and change it up. So be kind to yourself.
Thanks for sharing. No, that's some great advice. And I think the key that I'm hearing now, Vince, is to own you own it. So take ownership of it, and then B, take some action, right? I mean, whatever that action looks like for you, that makes sense. And know that you are purposefully doing something about it with intent. I think that's what's important. So kind of come to this part of the episode where we're going to get into final thoughts, and we'll have you guys share your final thoughts and kind of what you'd like our audience to take away from what we've shared today. So for me, and I'll go first, I want to talk about authenticity, and I think, and the reason I think that's very important when we talk about mindset and growth mindset is how authentic are you being to yourself and for yourself, right? And figuring out what that is and what that looks like and why that's important, and putting whatever work needs to go into that piece of it to be authentic, because in some ways that almost gives you a suit of armor. So it doesn't really matter how you may be judged or how you may be seen and all these other things, because you are approaching life and you are living life and you are going about doing the things that you see are relevant and important to you from an authentic standpoint. And I think that's a very important piece of it. So being authentic, and I think that's one of the things that can help lead you from a transformative standpoint. So if you want to transform or evolve or grow yourself in a certain direction, I think authenticity is an important piece of it. So definitely wrap yourself in that, understand what authenticity is all about, and make that an essential part of your journey and your growth, and obviously your mindset is being authentic to yourself. So that said, I'm going to come to Chris and Erica, and then Vince, I'll let you close us out for today. So Chris, what will your final thoughts be that you'd like to share with our folks?
Well, one of the things that I really enjoyed about today was, I tapped into it. I was doing my research last night, and then of course I got up this morning and I'm sleepy and trying to figure this thing out, because my coffee hasn't kicked in yet. But the idea of the mindset versus the skill set. I'm a mindset guy. I do have a ton of skills, but my skills are always evolving. But even more importantly, my mindset is always evolving. Some of the things when I was doing my research, I saw were some of the components of mindset. And the funny part, when I looked at this, it was looking at the idea of what employers look for in employees or potential employees, right? So some of the things that they were looking at were commitment, obviously, honesty, trustworthiness, adaptability, accountability, and flexibility. Now, those all speak to me. They do. But now, some of the things that the top attribute for me was the commitment, the honesty, and the flexibility, as well as the accountability. So those are the things that I try to espouse in my everyday travels when I'm dealing, like I said, whether I'm dealing with somebody on a personal level or whether I'm dealing with somebody on a professional level. I don't think it matters which one of those things we're talking about. They all play a major part in how you move. One thing that I've really, really wanted, that I really desire when people look at me, and like I said, this is both sides of the fence, is people look at me and say, like me or not, he's consistent. The messaging is consistent. I do that with my kids. I do that with the people I love. I want to, like I said, sometimes you got to you have to deliver the bad news sometimes. But if it's done in a manner that's consistent in how you operate, how you speak, how you handle people, then I think you get understood. Even through difficult times of people not wanting, because we all have our pushback and like, well, you just said that to me. Yes, I did. But if you understand me and know me, it's the intention is never malicious. It's never malicious. I think we all have that in us, but you gotta really get to the dark side with me before I become malicious with you. It takes a lot. That actually borders on being vengeful. But I just think that the overarching message for me is be consistent. Be consistent in everything you do. It will serve you and translate through your life. I'm trying to reach for some things that have been close and have been near my grasp, but I didn't accomplish the mission. We didn't get the mission accomplished as desired. And I'll close with this, because like I said, we talked about the belief system and how you were wired and conditioned. I'm at a point now with some of the things that we're working on individually, as working on as a collective. My overarching is, why not me? Why not me? I struggle with this. I struggle with the phrase of I'm deserving. That is the one thing I struggle with. And here's the crazy part is, down deep in my soul, I know I'm deserving. I'm one of God's children. Like I said, my intention is always for good. I'm not a super selfish person, but like I said, I struggle with being deserving. But at the end of the day, if I'm in a room by myself, I'm deserving. I'm just as deserving as the next man. I'm going to close with one last thing. I read something the other day, and it's been stuck in my mind. It said something to the effect of, comfort zones are beautiful places, but nothing grows there.
Nothing grows there. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. 100%.
And with that, I'll yield my time.
So, Erica, what about you? Final thoughts. What would you like to share with our audience as we wrap up for today?
Yep. Talking about mindset. Number one, protect your mind. Protect what you pour into your mind, and protect what others try to impose on your mind. So those are my final thoughts for the day. Protect your mind. That's the first step in protecting or shifting a mindset.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great advice too, because others, as we know, will try to pour a lot into your mind and your mindset if you allow it. So that's sage advice for sure. Vince, what about you? What are your final thoughts for today?
I have so many. I think one really timely conversation I was having, which is part of my final thoughts, is talking to a friend around how we view our ability to control situations and what that means. And I believe that a lot of that ties into that mindset. And it's one's belief of what they can control, they will control, and they might control. And it's interesting because when I was talking to this individual and saying, sometimes when you are overly prepared or overly structured or whatnot, it's my view that it could be a sign of, or a lot of things based on insecurities, because the two go hand in hand. And that kind of that ability for one to be okay with change and be okay with the universe allowing us to go into a different path to what we had planned or hoped to, that's all tied into that growth mindset. And one's enjoyment of being in that uncomfortable space has been something that I'm growing into. It's something that, it's a silly analogy, but you can think about when you have the awkward silence, and or maybe when you're giving a presentation, it's like quiet or whatnot. Take that and enjoy the awkwardness and just sit in it. And there's so much value in that, both for all. The same thing goes too when you feel like you are spiraling or have that negativity, just pause and recognize it and just sit with it. Not to find a solution or tell yourself, oh, this is wrong or whatnot. It's not the point. The point is to just be there, be present, and make a note and say, I'll come back to this. And you'll see a trend that it'll come up more and more and more. And as you see this, you'll have more insights, but it's not going to be something you're going to fix today or tomorrow, but it might take years or a lifetime.
Vince, thanks for sharing that. Well, guys, this has been a great episode today, and I think we've shared a lot of great insight as to the value and the importance of mindset. And as Erica said, protecting it is one piece, continuing to evolve it is another piece. Chris mentioned about comfort zone, and nothing grows there. So pushing yourself out of those areas, and Vince, as you just talked about there at the end, just the importance of knowing who you are and what you're about, and standing for that, and moving yourself forward. So I want to thank each and every one of you, our audience. Thank you for joining and watching, and we'll definitely see you guys next time. Until then, take care of each other, and we'll see you soon. Bye now.